Today, we are going to look at a really powerful idea, one that's kind of shaking up how we think about everything from school and grades to what it even means to be smart. Seriously, just think about that for a second. What if learning about, say, geometric shapes involved dancing and choreography? Or what if you learned about history by actually writing and performing a play? This isn't just wishful thinking, you know? It's a real and fundamental shift happening in education.
And there's a name for this whole idea. It's called Art Integrated Learning, or AIL for short. It's a strategy that uses art, we're talking music, dance, painting, theater, all of it, not just as its own little subject over in the corner, but as the very tool we use to learn everything else.
So, what is art integrated learning when you get right down to it? Let's dive into the details of how it actually works and why it's getting so much attention from educators all around the world. Okay, so here's the official definition from a major art center. And the two key phrases you really got to focus on are construct and demonstrate understanding. See, this isn't about just sitting there and listening to a lecture. It's about actively making something to prove you get it. So you're not just learning about fractions, you're maybe composing a piece of music that uses those fractions in its rhythm. And let me tell you, this is not just some fringe idea from a few innovative teachers. It's actually being written into national policy. India's 2020 National Education Policy, for example, really gets behind AIL. They see it as a way to make classrooms more joyful and to connect learning directly to culture. It's a big deal. That all sounds fantastic, right? But the real question is, does it actually work? Well, the research is pretty clear. Yes, it does, and in some really amazing ways. Let's take a look at what this means for our grades, for our personal growth, and even for our brains themselves. First up, let's talk numbers, the stuff everyone asks about. Study after study shows a direct link between integrating art and better academic results, and that includes higher test scores. But it's about so much more than grades. Think about it. Art doesn't have one single right answer. That creates this incredible space for learning where students can experiment and take risks without being terrified of getting it wrong. That kind of confidence, well, it spills over into every other subject. And speaking of confidence, AIL has a massive impact on socio-emotional growth. For those students who just don't connect with traditional classes, art can be a total lifeline. It gives them a new way to plug in. It gives them ownership of their work, which helps build these crucial skills like self-awareness and self-confidence, and helps them learn to direct their own learning. It can literally keep kids in school. And finally, let's get into what's happening inside our heads. Engaging with art is like a full-on cognitive workout. It sharpens things like spatial reasoning, which is huge for math and engineering, while also boosting your verbal skills and your memory. But here's the most important part. AIL helps students learn how to think, not just what to think. This all ties in so perfectly with Howard Gardner's famous theory of multiple intelligences. You know, traditional school tends to focus on just two ways of being smart, with words and with numbers. But art-integrated learning, it speaks to all the others: spatial, musical, bodily kinesthetic, interpersonal. It's built on the idea that every kid is smart. They just might show it in different ways. All right, so let's get practical. How does a teacher actually take a standard history or math lesson and turn it into this dynamic art-based experience? Check this out. This is a fantastic example. Making a Rocky, it's not just a fun craft project. It's a social studies lesson, right? You're talking about traditions, culture, and family. And it's also a math lesson. You're exploring patterns, symmetry, and geometry. One simple, really joyful activity is teaching concepts across totally different subjects. And this case study, it just lays out the process perfectly. Instead of just memorizing dates about the French Revolution, students get to become the characters. I mean, they have to really understand people's motivations to write the script. They have to work together to build the props. And then they have to find the confidence to perform. All of a sudden, history isn't some old story in a book. It's a real lived experience. This table basically sums it all up. You take one single activity, like learning a folk dance. Instantly, you're connecting to history by learning its cultural origins, to geography by understanding where it's from, and even to math through all the rhythms and counting patterns. It just shatters those artificial walls between subjects and shows how all knowledge is really connected. Okay, but let's be real. Actually putting this kind of vision into practice, well, it's not without its challenges. It really requires a big shift in how we think about curriculum, how we test students, and, well, the entire purpose of school. So, when people argue for putting more art into schools, they usually come from one of two places. The first argument is very practical. It says art teaches 21st century skills. Collaboration, innovation, all the things you need for the modern workplace. The other argument is a bit more philosophical. It says that art teaches us how to be curious, engaged, well-rounded human beings for our entire lives. This whole debate has led to this really powerful movement, turning STEM into STEAM. The idea is simple but profound. Adding that A for art to science, technology, engineering, and math isn't a distraction. It's the missing piece. It's what drives innovation, great design, and human-centered problem solving. And that really brings us to the final and maybe most important question. Art-integrated learning kind of forces us to ask what we truly want from our schools. Are we just trying to prepare students for the next test, or are we trying to equip them with the creativity, the confidence, and the curiosity they need to build a meaningful life?